It's time to knit, and today I'm going to teach you a couple of knitting terms that are used very often in knitting patterns. You'll hear them over and over again, and most of the time the people that write the patterns assume you know what these terms are. They are garter stitch and stockinette stitch. Now the lilac fabric is garter stitch and the turquoise fabric is stockinette stitch. Garter stitch is achieved by knitting every row or by purling every row, and it results in a fabric that has a series of valleys and ridges. And if I pull it apart here, you can see them a little bit better. But there is, when you knit a row, you get a valley. When you purl a row, you get a ridge, and they just alternate. So knit row, knit row, purl row. Garter stitch is a completely reversible stitch, so it looks exactly the same on both sides. Stockinette stitch is this swatch, the turquoise swatch, and it is achieved by knitting one row and then purling one row. Probably most often the knit side will be on the outside of your garment or the right side of the fabric, and the purl row will be on the wrong side of the fabric. You can tell the purl because it is all ridges, and the knit side is a smoother fabric. Each knit stitch, if I pull this apart, looks like a small V. Sometimes people will say it looks like a champagne glass or a margarita glass, which makes you happy. And people tend to think knitting is a little easier. So this is the happy side. The purl side you can remember by the bumps, which are like a strand of pearls. So knit a row, purl a row, you get stockinette stitch. As I said, most of the time the knit side is on the front of the fabric, but sometimes it's not. And in that case, it's called reverse stockinette stitch, which is really the exact same stitch, except you're just using the opposite side of the fabric. So knit a row, purl a row, with this being the right side of the fabric and the knit side being the wrong side of the fabric. Another difference between garter stitch and stockinette stitch is the way the fabric lays. In garter stitch, the fabric lays completely flat, and you don't have to worry about anything. Say if you're doing a scarf and you knit a long scarf, it's all in garter stitch, it is going to lay perfectly flat. In stockinette stitch, the edges of the fabric roll up a bit, and that is something that you really cannot do anything about. It's caused by the anatomy of the stitch, where the stitches are longer than they are wider, and in garter stitch it's a more square stitch, which causes it to lay flat. So you can't really block out this curl or do anything about it. It's not a problem when you're making a sweater and you're seaming it together on the side. That will take out the curl. But if you're doing something like a scarf, you'll need to put an edging on it, say perhaps a garter stitch edge on maybe the last 3 stitches on each side to keep it from rolling up. Just one of those things that you need to be aware of. It's not necessarily a bad thing, you just need to know how to compensate for it. So that is the differences between stockinette stitch and garter stitch. When you read those terms in a pattern, you'll know what the designer is talking about now. Thanks for watching today, and I'll see you next time that it's time to knit. Bye-bye.